Hi. Okay, so today we're going to speak about food. It's a big one, and how to trust our own inner healer. I know for a lot of us, we scour the internet, we look for different trends, different diets, different protocols, whether it be paleo, keto, autoimmune, vegan, whatever it is. And we listen to others. We give our power away. We get stressed out over differing opinions, the conflicts, and some people heal doing this, some people heal doing that. Some people say you're gonna get really sick doing this. Some people, it's different foods, and it can be stressful. And we need to unwind from that. And how do we trust and listen to our own self for what foods are good for us? It can be hard after we've had all these books and podcasts and research papers and studies and conflicting opinions. It can really be hard. And sometimes we just need a vacation from it all. Like, set it aside. Let's not follow a dogma. Let's not follow a diet. Let's not follow anything. And let's just hear ourselves for a moment. If you find that food is a source of stress and overwhelm because you just don't know if it's helping or hurting you, then sometimes you need a break. You need to disengage and disentangle from any thoughts or diets or whatever that you have that are not your own, but that are coming from outside sources. And that can be really challenging, but really empowering. So the first thing I would suggest is just stop and tell yourself, you just want to heal. You don't care who's right. You don't care what you have to eat. You just want it to be healthy, good, nourishing food that will, give you energy, sustain you, and help your body regenerate so that you can feel and live your best. So, you need to put everything else aside and just not care who's right, what's right, what's the most ethical, what's the most who's right, who's wrong, and really pay attention to how you feel with these foods. Okay, so once you disentangle, once you decide my identity is not wrapped up in a diet, I'm not following a certain diet or protocol, I'm free to eat whatever I can to heal my body and nourish my body. That is the first step. Once you're there, and that could take a while, but once you're there, once you just make that decision, how do we tell? That can be challenging. So what I want you to notice is it's not really in eating a food and then self-monitoring for symptoms, although that's what we think in many cases. What it's more like is, what are our thoughts doing? So what are our patterns? So when we eat a food, any food, let's just start with that. We're going to have whole foods from every category. They're organic and they're whole. They're unprocessed. So everything from vegetables, fruit, legumes, grains, starches, meat, fish, organs, whatever it is. All these whole natural foods that are prepared and grown organically and in the right way, have been healthy for many different people. But we get stuck and we get afraid in this diet dogma or these lessons that we think are true but actually haven't helped us to date. So we need to disentangle, and then we need to say to ourselves as we're eating, what patterns are coming up for you? Are you always afraid after you eat a certain food? Did that food hurt me? Is that food hurting me? Is that going to cause me symptoms? If you just eat an avocado and then you say, oh my gosh, am I going to have a histamine response? But it's just something that you're used to because you've been conditioned to think that way. Or is it ongoing? Is it a pattern? Are you always stressed and worried after? Are you always thinking that your symptoms are related to this food or that food or a certain food? Then stop eating them. If the symptoms continue and you're stressed out about different foods, like, oh my God, could it have been that food, stop eating those foods. Okay, until you get to a handful of foods that you're comfortable with. And if you're still having symptoms, we can guarantee that it's actually probably not the food. So we have to realize that making our diet super small is not always the answer. On the flip side, but if we're bothered by it, if our mind is going over these things, like that's probably hurting me, it's probably giving me symptoms, is that giving me symptoms? Then those are the foods we stop eating, not because somebody else said so, but because our mind is constantly fixated on it. And that's causing our psyche, our mind, additional tension that need not be there. So take those foods out of your diet so that you can take that tension off your plate of just wondering, have these foods hurt you? Similarly, if you're eating different foods, or if you're thinking, oh, I'd really love to eat this, but I can't. It's not on my diet. It's not on my protocol. They say it's not good for me. You know, it's a tomato and it's a nightshade. It will totally wreck me. But you're drawn to thinking about it constantly. Like, oh, I wish I could eat that tomato, or I wish I could eat that strawberry. Or piece of watermelon, God forbid, it's, oh my God, you know, my blood sugar's gonna shoot through the roof. But you're drawn to these foods and you want to eat them. Try, go ahead. Does that really happen? Or do you feel satisfied by eating a food that you were called to eat and nourished towards, and knowing that it's a whole healthy food from the earth? So if you feel drawn to certain foods, or wishing or yearning that you could eat certain foods, or that it wasn't off your diet, or you know, you'd feel good or happy, or it would just feel so amazing to take a bite of that whole natural food, please do. You know, if everything goes to shit after and you find yourself super stressed and, you know, did that hurt me? Then you can stop eating that food, because it's the patterns here that we're looking for over time. So if eating a food, you know, if you're drawn to something like chocolate cake and then you always feel guilty after eating it, well then, you know, even though you're drawn to it, the fact that you're guilty over it is a repetitive pattern, so you shouldn't eat the cake even though you're drawn to it. But you know, you might be drawn to strawberries or say bananas, and maybe they're off your protocol, but you eat them and you don't really feel that guilt after. You think maybe you should. You know you're not supposed to on your protocol, but you don't really feel that nagging guilt, like, oh my God, I shouldn't have ate that. I truly shouldn't have ate that. So maybe you should be eating that food. So it's more like, how do you feel after, and what are the patterns that repeat? So if you're drawn to a food and you eat it and you don't feel overwhelming guilt or stress or tension afterwards on a repeating basis, like give yourself, you know, 5, 6, 7 times of eating the food. How do you feel after you eat the food? Are you in total stressed out mode and guilt and thinking I never should have eaten it? Then you know what, just don't include that food. It's not worth it, because your body is tense thinking about it. But if you really don't feel that guilt, if you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have eaten that food, they say I shouldn't eat that food, I'm not sure, but I really enjoyed that food, keep eating that food, you know? And same goes for the foods that you are not supposed to eat. So it's like listening, right? It's listening. If you eat something and you're like, man, you know, meat's on my protocol, but every time I eat meat, I feel like shit. And every time I, you know, or coconut's on my protocol, but every time I have coconut, I end up thinking, did the coconut do this to me? Did the coconut do this to me? Then that's not the food for you. So, right? So what I'm trying to say is, follow your own instincts. If you find yourself pointing to certain foods and wondering if they're the culprit and wondering if they're guilty over and over after you've eaten them, even though they're allowable to you in some fashion or you wouldn't have eaten them, you know, then you should just take that food away. And same on the positive side. So I can say this a million different ways, but it's more about you just listening, trying, expanding, giving yourself permission and forgiving yourself and giving yourself permission in advance that you don't care what foods you eat as long as you're healthy. And then just afterwards, after you eat the food, notice what your mind is doing. It's all about your mind. Is your mind feeling good about that? Is your mind feeling stressed? And maybe that's just a one time because you're so used to it. So, you know, if you've been off of a certain food for a while and you eat it, you might feel guilty like the first 2 times, but then after that, does that guilt go away? You know, like give yourself 5, 6, 7 times of eating a food, and is it just causing you super stress or is it not? And then just, you know, change your diet accordingly. It's so important that you take ownership of your own body and food and not be made to feel like you won't heal if you don't do it perfectly, or you're not on the right diet, because that's not true. People have healed on vegan diets, they've healed on paleo, they've healed on keto, they've healed on autoimmune protocol, they've healed on no diets at all. Okay, as long as we're eating organic, whole, natural foods from the earth, give yourself permission to explore and really find out, it's all about your mind. How does your mind feel once it's eaten that food? Does it have a hunch that that food is causing you problems? Or is it relieved to be able to eat that food? Does it taste good to you? Do you feel happy when you eat it? And you don't really have this nagging like, oh my God, that food is, you know, killing me. So please, it's taken me so long to understand this about food, especially if you believe food is the foundation of healing, which I do. But your mind is so important, and being able to hear yourself and trust yourself and be okay with what you put in your mouth and enjoy it and learn to be friends with it and learn to know that it's helping you, not hurting you, and to know that you can make your own decisions on how you feel about something, and you know whether something's hurting you or whether it's not by how you feel inside. You know, you can sense these things, and we really need to tap into that, our own ability, right, to be at peace and to know that we know deep down if that food is the cause of all our problems or if it's not. And, you know, we have to give ourselves a break. So I hope that you will do this and feel empowered doing it. Congratulate yourself for doing it. It's huge. And I hope you start today.